Now, my problem with Oracle is that these guys are taking on huge amounts of debt in order to build more AI data centers. There are other companies as well, like Amazon, Meta, or Google, who are also building huge amounts of data centers, but they are mostly using cash reserves, whereas Oracle is taking on huge amounts of debt. These guys are currently managing a total debt of roughly $108 billion and has roughly $8 to $10 billion in existing debt maturing annually through 2028. From the beginning of 2026, credit rating agencies like S&P and Moody's is cautiously negative about Oracle. While Oracle remains in the investment grade category, but they are currently walking a very thin line. The agencies are essentially telling Oracle, we believe that you can pay your bills today, but if your AI bet doesn't pay off within the next 24 months, we are going to downgrade your towards junk status. Their quarterly interest expense has already jumped 22% year over year, hitting $1 billion, more than $1 billion in Q2 of 2026, whereas Google pays roughly $700 million in annual interest payments. So Oracle pays $4 billion or more than $4 billion in interest payments, and Google pays roughly $700 million. So you can understand the difference between their debt structure. On top of this, their interest rate is also going up. Oracle used to borrow at roughly 2 to 3%, and those old bonds are expiring now, and they're replacing them with new ones at 6% or higher. So these guys are taking on more debt at higher interest rates. Now, a very interesting part of this expansion process is their legacy software business has a lot higher margin than their AI infrastructure business, for which they're spending billions, hundreds of billions to buy more GPUs and build more AI data centers. So Oracle is taking a lot of risk in order to expand revenue in a segment which has a lot lower gross margin than their legacy business. Now, I analyzed Oracle's earnings call transcripts, and according to Oracle management, a higher revenue with a lower margin is better than a lower revenue with a higher margin, because they think the amount of profit is more important than the percentage of profit. On the other hand, Oracle optimists argue that they have a backlog revenue of roughly $500 billion. So Oracle has effectively sold out their capacity for years. They have guaranteed revenue, which allows them to take on massive debt that a typical hardware company wouldn't handle. Oracle's management also believes that outsourcing the hardware is actually the bigger risk. For example, if Oracle thought of outsourcing
in
their
many
hardware
ways,
expansion
how do
to
you
Amazon,
take these
then
systems that
they would have to run
used to be
on
deterministic
top of
when you
Amazon's
think about
layer of
programming?
software
You know,
to manage
that's
the hardware.
what traditionally we think
And
about with
this
software. You have
layer acts like a
deterministic
speed limit.
software that does the same thing every time.
By building
So how
their
do you
own data
introduce these
centers, Oracle
non-deterministic
offers bare
models,
metal
these generative
access.
systems?
Their software
And there's
talks
a lot
directly
of
to the
problems
NVIDIA
that
chips,
that can
NVIDIA
crop
chips,
up
and the
because
networking
companies have been
hardware with zero
designed, enterprises have
interference.
been designed around building
For high-end data
deterministic
AI
software.
training,
So we're
Oracle's
just very
custom-built
focused on how do
RDMA
you bring the pieces of the
allows
stack together
GPUs
to
to
do in
share
a
data
secure,
20
in a
times faster
trustworthy, in a
than they
compliant
can
way.
on standard outsourced
How do you bring
clouds.
that capability into an enterprise? And
To a
there's
customer
tooling,
like
and then
OpenAI,
there's
a 20%
capabilities and
speed
skills for the
increase
company. And
saves
so we're just
billions of
very
dollars in
laser
training
focused
time.
on helping companies
On top
get those
of this,
capabilities into
Oracle
their
would
orgs.
have to
Well,
pay
so
a
obviously you
percentage
guys
of
have
the
a strong
profit or
viewpoint on
revenue
what
that they're
what that
getting
looks
from
like,
their
right? I
customers
We do.
to
Yeah.
I know you
AWS
do.
or
I know
Amazon.
this. So
Now, I have
when
another
you're having a
primary problem
conversation
with
with a
Oracle.
customer,
These guys are spending
where do
billions
they
to buy
start? Where do
NVIDIA
you
GPUs,
start? And
but
what
these
are the
GPUs
kind of
have
aspects that come into these
useful lifespan
conversations
of
that
roughly 3 to
are
4
relevant
years.
for everyone?
So
Yeah.
every 3 to 4
When
years,
we
these
talk
guys have to buy
to a
new
company, and
GPUs in
we
order
always
to
start with this idea of a maturity model,
keep the
like
capacity,
where are
keep
you
the
on that scale? Which
their current
isn't
capacity.
really unique to AI. That's something that we've
and
been
buy
doing
more
as
GPUs in order
technologists
to
for a long
increase their
time. We say,
capacity. So
you know, you can be
this is
here,
a
or you
never-ending
can be
game.
here. Where are you? Because
Now,
the
my
tools you
concern is
need,
that
the
in
training
case
your company needs,
Oracle is
the
not able
types
to
of things you
recoup
can
their
do
investment within the
differ
next
where
3
you
to
are. So
4 years,
that's stage
then
one, is
what
just
happens?
understanding
What
what
happens
you're
to
doing
the
today
debt
and where you
repayment?
want to go.
Okay.
But then there's also this
I want to
concept of
consider
helping
what
companies
happens if
understand what are you
AI
capable of doing
demand
if
frenzy
you
doesn't
have a
materialize.
system that
If
you can run
OpenAI
internally.
fails to meet their
And
commitment
you don't
that
have
they
to
have
worry
made
about
to
privacy.
Oracle,
You don't have to
because
worry about
Right,
security.
most of the
From a
$500 billion
regulatory
of
perspective,
backlog,
you can meet the
backlog
regulations of
revenue
any
that Oracle
location
has
that you need to
currently,
run in.
out of the 500 billion,
If
300
you're free from
billion
those
comes from
concerns,
OpenAI. So most of it comes from OpenAI.
now what would you do that maybe you couldn't do
There
before?
has been
It's
reports
an
that
interesting
OpenAI
point,
itself
the notion
is
of
struggling
I mean, obviously keeping your data
profitable.
is very important. So it's
So
unique in its
what
own.
happens
Starts
if
to factor into
OpenAI
aspects like
fails to meet
sovereign
their
AI, which
commitments?
is something that we've
Now,
started to hear
Oracle,
more
based
about.
on Oracle's earnings
Cohere
call
early on,
transcript,
I think we've all been fortunate
they
that you
have
chose to
addressed
train
this issue,
and
and they
deploy
have
your model on
mentioned
OCI.
that if
When you think
OpenAI
about
doesn't
OCI,
doesn't
obviously
meet
we
its
talk always about
commitment, then
performance and scalability and security.
they might
How do you guys
sell their
think about
capacity
the
to other players
platform
like Meta
and
or Amazon
where this all
or
goes in
Google.
the future?
But the
and
problem with
how you
this
support customer
argument
needs?
is
That's a
that
big question.
those
but-
guys are already building their own data
It
centers.
is a big question.
So why
I'm
would
glad you asked.
they
So one of the
use
teams that I
Oracle's
run within
capacity?
Cohere runs
It
our
doesn't make sense.
supercomputers. So we've been, clients
Oracle's
as well
management
as
has also made
partners on
another
how do we bring
argument
out
that
AI. And we
the data
just talked
centers
about
they're
sovereign
building are
AI.
in phases.
One of the things that we've
So
loved from
if
day one
OpenAI
with
fails
OCI
to meet their
is how
commitment
close you keep
within
things
the
to the
next 1
hardware.
year for the first phase
It
or the
makes
second
things
phase or
like
the third
sovereign
phase,
AI
then
and
they
saying
can
how do
just
we
stop the expansion process.
train for a model, how do
But
we do
I have found
bring
flaw
the
in this
minimum
as
set
well.
of software.
I mean, they have already
We
taken
bring
huge
that
amounts of
into
debt in order
OCI,
to
and it's very
finance
easy to
these
do
data
on
centers.
the Oracle
And
infrastructure.
they have
But at the
increased their
same time, you guys
projections
have the
for
right level
more
of
spending
managed
on CapEx.
services for us to
So
rely
what
on, so
happens
that I don't
if
have to
they are
have
not able to,
an organization of hundreds and
they are
hundreds
not
of
able to
infrastructure engineers.
materialize
I
this
can lean
capex
on
into revenue
OCI to do a lot of
That's a
that.
within the
very
next 2
interesting
or 3
point about
years.
having
What
the
happens
minimum set
if
of
their revenue
is that
projections
that's kind of
are
counter
not
to the old school,
are
right?
not
Where we
meeting
wrote code
targets.
endlessly and just
Now,
kind of
my
hope for that and hope for the
hypothesis
best
is
Yes,
that
as time went on.
if
So
Oracle's
one of the other things that you
revenue
guys have spent a lot of time
projections
on, I
does
know, is
not
just flexibility
materialize,
and
then it
deployment.
will
And
significantly
so,
impact
is
their
that
free cash flow. Because
it's called a
with,
company driven
with
requirement,
lower
or did this
margins
come
and
from
lower revenue,
customers as
obviously
well?
their
Yes,
free cash
I
flow
would say
projections will
it
also
was
come down.
primarily
On top of this, they will have to
company-driven
pay
at
off
first
their
because we very
existing
much
and their
saw
future loans,
the
along with
writing on the
higher
wall, if you
interests.
will, around this need for
So this will put a
sovereign AI, for the
significant
ability
strain
to
on their
deploy
profit
in many
margins and their free
locations.
cash flow. This
And we've seen more and more
might
customers say, hey,
lower
sometimes I
their
can't
overall
move
profit
all of
margins,
my
their free
data.
cash flows,
There's
and their
reasons it needs to
ability
live in a
pay
particular
dividends to
location.
their shareholders
But
or
to
buy back
simplify
shares,
the adoption process, I want the same
which
set of
in turn
tools in
may
every
negatively
location.
significantly
So that
impact
instead of having to think
their-
about how I'm going
their
to
stock
deploy an
price.
agent, I can do it in the same
Now,
way.
this could be one of the reasons why
that's what really
many
drove
other investors are
our
sharing
focus
such
on
concerns,
take
and
the same set of software,
this could
the
be a
minimum
reason
set of
why
things you need,
Oracle's
and deploy it
stock
everywhere.
price has been
And
going
then
down
allow
recently.
your company to focus on the higher order
On top
problems,
of
not
this,
how am I going to get things running
Oracle's
in different
core
locations.
legacy
Yeah, that's a
business,
very interesting point. I mean,
which
similarly,
mostly
when you
involves
think about
database
that
softwares, is
deployment
shrinking.
models,
The
data security,
reason
obviously
there
a
are
big part of it.
various
So,
reasons. One of the
I know that
reasons
you've
is
seen a lot of industries
the
that are
rise
sort
of
of,
open
I
source
don't want to say
database systems
embracing
like
it more than
Postgres
others,
or
but perhaps
MySQL.
it's top of mind for certain
So
industries.
these things
And
are
so,
coming
are there
into the
different
landscape
ways that you're seeing
and
customers
creating a problem
kind
for
of solve
Oracle.
that problem?